An antique sofa dwells in our home. Dwells in our home. Though it was once the property of my great-great-grandmother, and despite changes that it has experienced through the generations, I happen to know that actual horsehair still clings to parts of its bulky frame. Now, my mother remembers it as her grandmother's bed in an era when people more frequently came to live with extended family near the end of their lives. My grandmother called it the sacred sofa. Now, Bruce Feiler, the author of The Secret of Happy Families, says that the last 50 years has seen a wholesale revolution in what it means to be a family. And I think we all see that happening all around us. He says, we have families with one parent, two parents, three parents, four or more, and families with one faith, two or three faiths, and many, many, many with none. This diversity reflects a greater awareness that the traditional nuclear family structure does not and never did in fact fit all, and that while many celebrate a diverse collection of experiences in a relationship with a female-identified parent, some sit here today dreading this Mother's Day. And I will say that today I got more calls than I have ever gotten in the last week from mothers who said they were just too tired to be here today. Amid the complexities of this day is the fact that an observance begun by Unitarian Julia Ward Howe as a Mother's Day of Peace to protest the horrors of sons done to sons in war has become, at its worst, a commercial observance of a candy-coated motherhood to which few of us could or would aspire. And in the midst of all of this, we need to find a center and just breathe. In my 20s, I buy my first home. It's an old mill house. I put the day bed, as I call it, in the center of the living room. I get a book on upholstering. I make a slipcover for the worn old thing, tired of navigating the hook and eye construction of what they thought a slipcover was 40 years before that. My cover is bold and bright. It's one of the few things that I have ever taken the time to sew with care, and I am astounded on a daily basis that the pleats pleat. You know, the very landscape in which families are situated today has changed. Navigating nap time is child's play next to navigating screen time, Feiler observes. Is it possible to develop timeless values in a 24/7 world that prizes novelty and coarseness? He concludes this: these days, the old rules no longer apply, but the new ones have yet to be written. He says modern families need to be agile, which is all very well and good, except agility can be quite tiring when combined with the skyrocketing cost of housing in our area, the grueling commute times, the daycare and child's activities, which are expensive in both time and money. Families with young children today experience a lot of stress. And that means paying attention to those little tasty moments of joy and possibility, and it makes that even more important. When my daughter enters my life, she sits with 4 giggly friends on the sleigh bed couch. That awkward, hulking piece of furniture is so deep that their little legs stick out straight in front of them as they laugh and hide their faces in the pillows. How quickly life can move forward. How soon the routine times become the pastimes. how precious the moments are, and how easy it is to miss them because we're so busy taking pictures to document them on our digital devices. And I say this as a former professional photographer who burned a lot of film in the day when it was actually film. Sometimes it is just better to take one fewer frame and instead breathe into the moment and the immensity of awe. My son is whisked off my chest, where he lies for what seems like only a moment after birth. He's put in the special care unit because an air pocket has formed outside of his lungs. After 4 traumatic days, which included him not being able to meet the big sister who had been awaiting him, which included the torture of blood draws from baby veins and the aching need to hold one that I could not touch because of the wires and the tubes, we bring him home from the hospital. No words can describe what it meant to lie with that little life on my chest, on that couch, with my daughter cuddling close. We lie there for the better part of an hour. He and I lie there for the better part of an afternoon. My daughter, the proud big sister, finally decides it's still time to go out and play with friends. The afternoon light burnishes the room, and the simple physical satisfaction of touch is something I can almost taste, like that best single bite, that delectable morsel. Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh says, in the busyness of our days, we need to take the time to center ourselves and to touch base with what is happening in our hearts. When the mother hears her baby crying, he says, she puts down whatever she has in her hands, she goes into the room and takes that baby in her arms. The moment the baby is lifted into the mother's arms, the energy of wisdom has already begun to penetrate into the baby's body. The mother doesn't know yet what is the matter with the baby, but the fact that she has taken the time to put that baby in her arms already gives her child some relief. When the understanding comes, the mother can transform the situation, and it's the same thing with meditation. When you have pain within you, the first thing to do is to bring the energy of mindfulness to embrace that pain. I know you're there, little anger, little loss, my old friends. Breathe. I am taking care of you now. We live in a crazy world where we have so little time to know what's going on with us. If we do not take that kind of time, even for just a few moments a day, we'll spin and spin until something will break. Anne Lamott writes, almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, including you. Now, Lamott is known for her championship of the unseen and the downtrodden, a really beloved author, and she was recently embroiled in a controversy when she made a very crude, phobic remark about Caitlyn Jenner on Twitter that went everywhere. And I mention this because, to me, this little story is symbolic of how hard it is to navigate being a good person in an ever-changing world. And how do we think the children in our midst are learning to do this? I have the privilege, as the minister of this amazing congregation, to hear all kinds of stories. But as I was preparing this week, there were 2 kinds of stories that kept coming back to me. The first are the stories that I hear from our teens, more than I care to count, who are suffering because they do not see hope in the world in which they are living. I visit too many of our teens in the psychiatric facility in Concord. That's actually where I'm most likely to have a visit with one of our teens. or after they have had an incident of substance abuse. These are quiet stories that are happening all around us that we do not hear. And the other set of stories that have been with me so much this week are the stories of those who were parents in the late 1960s and early 1970s, when we were experiencing another sea change time for families in our culture. I think those two times are very different. In that earlier time, we were trying to give our children freedom. In these times, we're trying to let our children make their own choices, but also give them guidance in a world in which they have, in some ways, too much freedom. In the world in which they used to live, a liberal parent might say, "Oh, it's okay with me if my kid occasionally smokes pot." Today, the marijuana that our kids have free access to, in fact, have to actually physically repel at our schools, is almost 10 times as potent, has almost 10 times the mind-altering ingredients than the kinds the hippies I walked past as a child smoked. It's now more likely to be sold by gangs with their representatives in our schools and laced with much scarier substances. The schools are overwrought. California's schools are 46th in the nation. And that is an abomination. I don't use that word often. The police touch many more of our middle-class kids' lives because too many parents cannot combat the societal forces that are all around us. In this world, noting the blessed spirit of our life seems like a luxury, but parents must do that because they need to find sustenance, feeling that they are losing their children to a war as deadly as the one that Julia Ward Howe railed against in that 19th century time. And this is all of ours to hold, all of ours. The sacred sofa is my young son's favorite ship. It is also a fort, it is a house, it is a cave where animals of various wildnesses live. It can be a strategic cliff from which you can throw your spittle-enhanced toddler toys on your teenage sister's friends. They will then scream in a particularly satisfying way, and you'll get a lot of attention for that. It can also be a place to burrow down when the evil mother comes to take you to bed. Right before I had kids, I ran a statewide leadership program in North Carolina. And we used to get together, us young working moms, and talk about the need for life balance and how we were going to build the time into it and how we were sure we would find the formula to do that. I don't believe in those kinds of conversations anymore, because I don't think that's the kind of world where we're living. I think that all of us need to find those ways to find those little moments to savor and to think about the larger frame of what's important in our lives. I think that we need to listen to the great lessons of those who have known what it's like to love people in a world in which you don't have ultimate control. Listening to the spirit of those great gospel hymns which talk about what it feels like to feel the Spirit, a sung version of that lifeline of hope and possibility in the face of unspeakable challenge. They sing out to us to savor whatever moments we can. My daughter sleeps in the daybed, refitted with a new mattress, during her last 2 years of high school. That we ever got it into her room in that particular tiny house is a feat that involved many angles and a great deal more curse words. It takes up about half the floor space in her actual room. The black lacquer on the rolled wickered ends is wearing off, and the whole contraption is often hung with bits of art under construction and draped with half-finished knitting projects. Life has become busier and busier, as it has for all of us. We are all filled with the vague idea those of us of any age, that we are not doing all that we should be doing and that the world is spinning faster and faster around us. Time for creating, time for imagining, time for possibility can get away from all of us if we're not careful. And we are truly at a loss, those of us who know that everyone in this world has a relationship with some child that is meaningful to them. How to pass down values in a mass media culture which more effectively transmits other people's values today to the children we love than we can do. Rabbi Sandy Sasso Eisenberg says, "We want our children to be more than consumers and competitors. We want them to be gracious and grateful. We want them to have courage in difficult times. We want them to have a sense of joy and purpose. That's what it means to nurture their spiritual lives." And she goes on to say, "To me, spirituality is that sense of transcendence. It's a recognition that there's something greater out there besides ourselves. And it's that perception that all life is connected." The slip cover that I so painstakingly made gets worn out by being slept on by two uppity Dalmatians. When we move here to California, everything seems more purchased. Time is scarce, so I mail order a slip cover with an Asian motif for the rental house that we first live in. The couch is still in the living room of that house. And the one that I consider my third child, though we have no legal connection, sleeps on it for a couple of weeks before deciding that the hammock, though outside, is really a great deal more comfortable than that couch. To understand the challenges that are facing families of all kinds today, we have to take the time to feel the connections and our place amid them, and then seize and share those moments of awareness. Sandy Sasso Eisenberg says, "First, we need to nurture our own spiritual life. And most of all, what we need to do in terms of nurturing our children's spirituality requires us to be aware, because it happens when no one else is looking, when it's not at all planned for. It's the thing that happens when you see a homeless person on the street and your child asks you who that is. Or when you see an animal that has been injured by a car and they ask, well, what should we do? It's how we act with other people and how they observe us. These are all messages, she says, to our children about what really matters in life, what's precious, what's more important than earning a living, going through our daily routines. To have these conversations, we have to be aware and awake to those tiny times with our children, our young neighbors, our grand or great-grandchildren, or the children here in this church community, where every week in the last couple years, we have struggled to have enough teachers in our classroom every single week. For here, we are reinventing what religious education means in a culture that says that Sunday basketball or swim is more important than time-building religious community. That cute crafts and vague ideas really aren't worth giving up the one day you have in the week to sleep in as a family. We're thinking about that. We're trying to find the answers, and we don't know them all, but we need to pay attention. I am now under pressure from my youngest to replace the sofa with an IKEA unit. He says that would be more conducive to having teenagers and screen viewing. One can certainly argue that a modern couch would take up less room in our cramped family room, and that in turn would allow more room for the large pillows on which our two rescue greyhounds lounge. And those girls, old ladies actually, are too refined or too aged to jump on furniture. We live in a world where planned obsolescence is a thing, where people are highly mobile, where kids are highly mobile and over-involved, where the idea of passing furniture down to your children seems about as realistic as talking to an imaginary creature like a dragon. Or perhaps it seems like intergenerational cruelty at its worst. From a rational sense, it doesn't make any sense to keep lugging around the sacred sofa. And I haven't even mentioned its kin, which is a slimmer version that has spooled ends, which lives in a corner of my bedroom, and it just week by week refuses to be what I fantasize it will be, the ideal reading couch. Instead, it somehow converts itself over and over again into a magnet for extra papers, stray clothes, and things that I've been meaning to get out of the house one way or another. I could get rid of these both, or I could rethink their purpose once again, just as we are doing as a society, as families, as religious communities. I could ask again what it means to our future. For now, I'm going to keep them, though, because for me, they are the serving platters upon which I have tasted too many a morsel. I know you all taste yours as well. That day when the peace reigns in the place of fighting among your little ones, the time when laughter bounces all over the ceiling of your home, or when you have to put the extra leaf in the table because all the kids and their significant others are coming home. The time you took your kid to vote or stand in a street corner, fighting that sense of hopelessness that so infects our younger generations. The day when you realized that your life has somehow much more good in it than you ever imagined it could have. The day when you understood that the painful times you are experiencing highlight the sweet parts more. The times when you paid attention, when you imagined possibility. So lie on that sofa, even though it's lumpy and its lacquer is cracked, or recline someplace sacred in your lore. Take the gift of your life not as someone idealizes it should be, but the gift of your life as it is. Savor the morsels, every one, for they give life its flavor and its sustenance.